In the previous chapter, we saw Zhuo Fan completely humiliating the Kong twins, destroying their souls and proving the strength of the demon scheming sect. Meanwhile, Ren Kong's plans fell apart as he realized the twins were no match for Zhuo Fan. With Zhuo Fan's bold declaration, the demon scheming sect signaled a shift in power within Tianyu. Let's begin the chapter. Ren Kong squinted, his body jerking in fright. What had just happened defied everything he knew. Kong Shan and Kong Lin, his trusted allies, had charged toward a single enemy, only to be crushed into nothing in the blink of an eye. The sheer power on display left him paralyzed. His confidence shattered into pieces. His thoughts spiraled into despair. If Zhuo Fan could do this without breaking a sweat, then all the rumors he'd brushed aside as exaggerations were not only true, they were an understatement. A monster stood before him, one he could never dare to challenge. Yet, despite his terror, Ren Kong had no choice but to confront a more pressing issue. Qi Changlong and his companions were closing in, their cold smiles chilling him to the core. Even without Zhuo Fan stepping in, the 6 ethereal stage experts bearing down on his group, with only himself as their lone ethereal stage defender, made the situation utterly hopeless. His radiant stage teammates were useless in the face of such overwhelming power. Sweat poured down his face as fear gripped him. His lips trembled, his mouth hung open, and tears welled up in his eyes. His teammates turned to him, their expressions pleading for salvation. Yet Ren Kong had no answers for them, only the same crushing dread. Qi Changlong stepped forward, cracking his knuckles with deliberate menace. His grin was savage, his intentions clear. Ren Kong staggered backward, each step unsteady, his heart pounding furiously. From behind him came a taunting voice. Zhuo Fan's voice. "Young Master Ren, tell me, who's the cat and who's the mouse now?" Zhuo Fan's snicker echoed in the air, dripping with mockery. Ren Kong's face flushed red with fury. He gritted his teeth, his body trembling, not from anger but from humiliation. Zhuo Fan was enjoying every second of his suffering, and the realization stung. Zhuo Fan continued, his tone growing more amused. "That's right, I'm here to humiliate you. But you know, on account of your exquisite manners yesterday, I'll give you a chance. You see, in a team battle like this, the door will open after 6 hours, and the match will end regardless of what happens. Isn't that the rule? Since you're so familiar with this place, why don't you scurry off and find a nice little hidey hole? If you can manage to stay hidden for 6 hours, then maybe, just maybe, you'll survive. But if we find you..." Zhuo Fan let out a dark laugh. "Well, then it's only fair for the cat to enjoy its prize." The disciples of the demon scheming sect burst into laughter, their eyes filled with scorn for Ren Kong and his followers. Zhuo Fan's mockery was deliberate, calculated. The audience watching the battle couldn't help but chuckle as well. "This is just how demonic cultivators are," someone murmured, shaking their head. Wen Tao, one of the spectators, smirked and commented, "All demonic cultivators are the same. They just love putting on a show with their cruelty." Han Yunfeng, standing nearby, gave him a sidelong glance. "This isn't just about cruelty. This is what absolute power looks like. Do you think you'd see something like this in an even match?" Wen Tao nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. Real cruelty only surfaces when there's a massive power imbalance. Maybe Zhuo Fan is sending a message to everyone watching. Don't mess with the demon scheming sect, no matter how strong you think you are." Han Yunfeng smiled faintly. "So will you still stand against him?" Wen Tao's gaze sharpened. "Regardless of the outcome, I'd be honored to face an opponent like him." Han Yunfeng fell silent, Wen Tao's words hitting deeper than he expected. Fighting a losing battle might seem foolish, but for a cultivator, the act of defiance itself was part of their nature. To back down out of fear would go against everything they stood for. If Han Yunfeng retreated now, how could he ever advance in his cultivation? His eyes narrowed as he looked at Zhuo Fan again, a renewed determination filling his heart. Zhuo Fan, oblivious to the spectators' thoughts, began counting down. His voice was slow, deliberate, and filled with amusement. 10, 9, 8. Koi Lang and the others grinned at Ren Kong, their expressions predatory. They could already see how this was going to end. Ren Kong's face twisted with rage and humiliation. How dare he humiliate me like this? But as Zhuo Fan's countdown continued, Ren Kong had no choice but to swallow his pride. When it came to choosing between dignity and survival, survival always won. Without another word, he turned and bolted, running as fast as his legs could carry him. His disciples followed suit, scrambling after their young master like frightened rats fleeing a sinking ship. 3, 2, 1. Fan finished the countdown with a smirk. Kui Lang and the others laughed as they prepared to give chase. They were clearly looking forward to this hunt. "Let's all relish this game, shall we?" Fan said, his grin widening. And with that, the disciples vanished into the shadows one by one. Fan lingered for a moment, his smirk never fading, before disappearing as well. The valley fell silent once more, the tranquility a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. Elsewhere in the forest, Fan reappeared, his eyes scanning his surroundings. Satisfied, he nodded to himself. This must be the blind spot in the monitoring arrays. In his hand was a crystal, a sacred stone, glowing faintly with spiritual energy. Black energy coiled around his fingers, seeping into the stone and dissolving it slowly. Fan watched intently as the spiritual energy drifted, following its flow with laser focus. "There it is," he muttered, his lips curling into a satisfied smile. Without wasting another second, he vanished once more, moving swiftly through the forest. Carefully, he avoided the monitoring arrays, following the trail of spiritual energy until he arrived at the foot of a vast mountain range. The air here was thick with spiritual energy, far denser than anything he'd encountered before. The mountain range itself seemed to glow, its radiance like that of an azure dragon. "So this is it," Fan murmured, his heart racing. "A Western land's sacred mine. No wonder it's hidden away in this sealed dimension." The sheer magnitude of spiritual energy confirmed his suspicions. This was no ordinary mountain. It was a treasure trove of unimaginable value. Fan's eyes gleamed with excitement. "This explains everything," he whispered. Using heaven-trailing sects hunt as a distraction was the right call. Now I can explore this in peace. From Shi Wuyu's earlier explanation, it was clear that the sacred mines of the 5 lands could only be exploited along the edges. The core of these mines was guarded by a powerful array that only experts from the sacred domain could set up. This raised an intriguing question. Who, besides him, Fan, could end up in the mortal domain by blowing themselves up so dramatically? Moreover, the path connecting the sacred domain and the mortal world had long been sealed shut. Even saints would struggle to breach it, let alone anyone else. The implications were startling, yet the answer seemed glaringly obvious. Fan squinted, deep in thought. This had to be tied to the 5 sacred beasts. Kun Peng, one of those beasts, had already tasked him with finding the others while holding young Sanzi as leverage. It all clicked into place. He shifted his gaze to the area around him, his brow twitching as he noticed something peculiar. The sacred mine is so critical that there are dozens of monitoring arrays set up just within 100 meters of it. Not to mention, they're all concealed quite cleverly, he murmured to himself. A smug grin spread across his face as he muttered, "What a pity you all ran into me. When it comes to arrays, I'm your great-great-great ancestor." With a confident smirk, his right eye flashed with a golden light. "And besides, your attention should be fully occupied with Lu Si and the others. That means I've got free rein here. He. With a soft whoosh, Fan vanished from sight, reappearing sporadically across the mountain range. Each spot he chose was deliberately outside the reach of the monitoring arrays. After carefully maneuvering, he finally stopped before the dimly lit mouth of a cave. As he stepped inside, not a single one of the hundreds of arrays outside reacted to his presence. Fan let out a small sigh of relief and began examining the cave. The walls glittered with faintly glowing crystals, each radiating a dense, spiritual energy so intense it sent shivers down his spine. His eyes gleamed with excitement. This was the entrance to the sacred mine. The sparkling crystals were none other than sacred stones formed by the vein. All sacred mines were created atop a world array, which concentrated the energy needed to produce these sacred stones. However, This unique property meant that no other arrays could be effectively set up within a sacred mine without being disrupted by the natural flow of energy. For this reason, Zhuo Fan wasn't too worried about any hidden traps or monitoring devices inside. After all, creating sacred arrays was an impossibility in the mortal domain. Feeling reassured, he strode deeper into the mine, curious to see what kind of expert had gone to such lengths to protect this place. But then, just a few steps in, a sharp, ear-piercing ringing filled the air. Zhuo Fan froze. "What's going on? Is someone here?" he muttered cautiously. The deeper he went, the louder the ringing grew until he reached the end of the passage, and what he saw left him utterly stunned. Suspended above the ground was a 2-meter-long sword, shrouded in a prismatic haze. The sword trembled occasionally, releasing an enchanting hum that echoed through the cave. Even more remarkable, the rich spiritual energy from the surrounding sacred stones was flowing directly into the sword, nourishing it like a newborn pup feeding on its mother's milk. Zhuo Fan's jaw dropped as he gasped. "Is that a sacred weapon?" Squinting at the weapon, he exclaimed, "And not just any sacred weapon, it looks like a 6th-grade one. The strongest of its kind from the sacred domain." Sacred weapons were a tier above even the 12th-grade spiritual weapons, their power unparalleled. However, their full potential could only be unleashed by someone from the sacred domain. Furthermore, refining such weapons required sacred stones, making the process so intricate that even in the sacred domain, sacred weapons were exceedingly rare. Zhuo Fan's thoughts raced. Back when he was the Grand Leader of the 8 Emperors, he had only theorized about refining a 3rd-grade sacred weapon. Even that had remained a pipe dream due to the scarcity of materials. He recalled the countless times he had scammed lands from the Sheng clan just to obtain a handful of sacred stones, always running for his life afterward. Yet here, in the tiny mortal domain, lay a legendary 6th-grade sacred weapon. The sight was enough to make his heart race. For someone like Zhuo Fan, who had sacred stones in abundance but no sacred weapon, this was like discovering a treasure trove. There was no way he was going to let this opportunity slip by. His lips curled into a mischievous grin as he approached the weapon. "Ha ha ha! I know you have a consciousness. This place must be dreadfully boring for you, all dark and gloomy. Why don't you come with me? We can explore the world together." The sword trembled faintly, emitting a sharp light in response. "Wait, wait!" Zhuo Fan jumped back, waving his hands frantically. "I mean no harm. I'm not trying to take you by force. Look, I know sacred weapons need sacred stones to maintain their energy. I've got plenty of those. If you come with me, you'll get to roam the world and feast on all the sacred stones you could ever want. Doesn't that sound better than being stuck here all alone?" He flashed an almost predatory smile, pulling out a sacred stone as proof. "See? I'm not lying. Come with me, and I'll make sure you're well fed. You'll even have the freedom to stretch your legs whenever you want. How about it?" His thunder ring gleamed as he added, "You can check for yourself. If you don't like it, you're free to leave. I couldn't lock you up even if I tried." The sword seemed hesitant, its hum growing softer as it considered his offer. Zhuo Fan's excitement surged. He could hardly believe it. He was on the verge of acquiring the strongest sacred weapon. This was a dream come true. But just as he thought victory was within his grasp, a sudden burst of blue flame erupted from his thunder ring. At the same time, an azure flame appeared on his forehead, his body crackled with purple lightning, and his right arm glowed crimson. Zhuo Fan froze in shock. A bone-chilling bloodlust filled the cave, and his gaze snapped back to the longsword. The sword's earlier hesitance had vanished, replaced by a murderous intent so palpable it made Zhuo Fan's heart pound. Before he could react, the sword attacked, its blade slicing through the air with deadly precision. Zhuo Fan instinctively raised his Qilin arm to block, but to his utter disbelief, The sacred weapon's energy pierced straight through it, drawing blood. How? How is this possible? He stammered, his mind reeling. His Qilin arm, a gift from a sacred beast, was supposed to be invincible. Yet this sword's mere energy had broken through it effortlessly. The sword's relentless attacks gave him no time to think. Its blade shone with a dazzling light as it lunged for him again. Panic set in. For the first time, Zhuo Fan felt genuine fear. Knowing he couldn't match the sword's power, he made a desperate decision. If he couldn't win, he would run. With a flash of golden light from his right eye, he teleported 100 meters away. But the sword wasn't fooled. It quickly adjusted its trajectory, homing in on him once more. Zhuo Fan dodged frantically, careful not to leave the cave and risk triggering the monitoring arrays outside. He was trapped in this narrow space with a weapon that clearly intended to kill him. As the chase dragged on, he realized this battle was a losing game. The sword could endlessly replenish its energy here, while his own reserves were dwindling fast. Desperation fueled his next move. Deciding to carve a new tunnel out of the cave, he activated the second stage of his divine eye of the void, Void Annihilation. The space trembled under his attack, but to his horror, the sacred stones forming the cave walls remained unscathed. Zhuo Fan's heart sank. The cave was unbreakable, and the sword was closing in again.